Oh boy, is this one gonna trigger some people. Climbing is just a fledgling sport with relatively little science or history for us to learn best practices. What should be fundamental principles of training and rehab are instead often obscured by speculation and or lack of data. Combine that with social media and online forums and we get myths running rampant. That's a problem because at best these myths will slow your progress and at worst they'll get you injured. So with a little knowledge of anatomy, some general exercise science, and a sprinkle of common sense, let's go through some pervasive climbing myths I hear all the time and put them to bed once and for all. Number 5, climbing dynamically is bad or dangerous. I think this one stems from the flawed but understandable comparison climbers tend to make between dynamic climbing and sloppy climbing. We imagine cutting feet on every move, ugly, jerky movement, and generally forgoing technique in favor of dynoing. On the contrary, when done well, dynamic climbing can be more efficient than static climbing without increasing injury risk.
I think people are intimidated by dynamics because they see it as being jerky and jolting and powerful, and that's just not the case. It's just taking advantage of some swing. That's it.
A great example is the dead point. When you sag down, you're in a prime position to generate upward momentum with your arms and legs. You then generate just enough momentum to float your body to the next hold, catching it during that brief window just before gravity starts to pull you back down. In contrast, accomplishing the same move statically involves intense muscle contraction for the entire duration of the move, which really gets hard as you get into more and more disadvantaged joint positions. As Dan would say,
it's easier to do things with momentum. It's easier to do things with momentum. It's easier to do things with momentum.
So rather than thinking of dynamic climbing as sloppy climbing, think of it as simply using momentum to your advantage to avoid wasting energy in disadvantaged positions. Just remember that you need to build strength and stability and awareness of your body to perform large, powerful moves safely. Start with smaller movements on the wall to hone your coordination and joint stability, then progress to bigger moves over time. Number 4, dehydration equals sense. This is a funny one because I don't think anyone actually thinks dehydration is good, and yet climbers will sometimes severely limit the amount of food and water they drink on long climbing days. Sometimes this is accidental. Exercise is a strong hunger suppressant, plus sometimes we just don't realize how hard our bodies are working. Conversely, some climbers do it because they're worried food and water will increase their weight and hurt their performance. It just goes to show how powerful our minds can be at overriding basic signals from our bodies. However, it's well documented that carbs, water, and electrolytes are essential for maintaining physical performance during extended, strenuous activity, not to mention their role in recovery. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about an hour-long gym session here. Where extra fuel and hydration really matters is those long sessions when you're climbing and hiking out in the elements all day long. A research review article from Judelson in 2007 concludes that based on current evidence, hypohydration, aka dehydration, appears to consistently attenuate strength by approximately 2%, power by approximately 3%, and high-intensity endurance by approximately 10%. Most people will grab a Gatorade, but I'm personally not a huge fan of that because I like getting my extra climbing day carbs from tasty things that make me happy, like gummy bears. But I still need to make sure I get plenty of water and electrolytes, which is why I'm stoked that Element is the sponsor of this video.
I don't get a ton of salt in my normal diet, and I don't want to get shut down on my project because of some cramp or fatigue that I could have easily avoided. So I use Element to help me maintain a good balance of electrolytes. Element is a tasty, sugar-free electrolyte drink mix with a unique ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. It has everything I want in an electrolyte mix and nothing I don't. Element can help prevent muscle cramps, fatigue, headaches, and other common symptoms of electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering our viewers a free sample pack with any order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/HoopersBeta.
Number 3, you should only climb to get better at climbing. Early in your climbing career, I would certainly advocate for getting your mileage in to improve at climbing rather than worrying about advanced strength training. There's so much technique and coordination to learn in climbing that only climbing itself can teach you, which is where the statement, just climb to get better at climbing, generally comes from. The problem is, after you reach a certain level of proficiency in climbing, that advice tends to be too simplistic to produce consistent progress. Telling someone to just climb to get better at climbing is like telling someone to just drive to become a Formula One driver. Just drive is far too simple and passive to consistently increase your driving skills to higher and higher levels. The same thing happens in climbing, where most climbers that just climb find themselves plateauing even though they climb frequently. Don't get me wrong, if just climbing works for you and makes you happy, by all means continue. I'm certainly not saying that never works, but I'd argue most climbers will be left needing a slightly different approach.
The deal is that there are unfortunately a number of facets that are tested by climbing that are not adequately trained by climbing. So there are a whole variety of positions that you get into that are somewhat intermittent and they're not overloadable, and yet you need them to be able to climb well. And so it's all these things that you're looking for that are necessary for climbing but not adequately tested by climbing. That should be sort of dictating what your external training is.
Your body will not continue to get stronger just because you pull on some holds a few times a week. Strength adaptations take specific, concerted effort to accomplish consistently. If your climbing sessions are always quite casual or haphazard, or involve only a few tries on climbs way above your skill level, or just a couple of climbs you can easily send, you will eventually not meet the parameters to promote adaptation. In that case, you need a more intentional approach to training to regain the needed intensity. This can sometimes be done on the wall by structuring your sessions to suit your goals, like Adamandra does with interval training. So your training still ends up being climbing, but now it's more intentional and effective. Alternatively, off-the-wall training tends to be superior for many purposes. In general, I recommend choosing exercises that are functional for climbing and that you can progress in difficulty over time to achieve measurable gains. Number 2, resistance training will make you too big and heavy. If your goal is simply to increase strength for climbing with resistance training, you will not put on weight nearly as quickly as you would think. We're bombarded by fitness influencers telling us we'll look like we came straight from Mount Olympus if we follow their simple program and buy their supplements. In reality, increasing muscle mass that much takes not days, not weeks, but years. Years of concerted mass building effort, all while maintaining an insane caloric intake. The exercises you perform for climbing gains will usually be more focused on strength more than hypertrophy, so you won't be optimizing your training for increasing mass. On top of all that, the strength gains you achieve from strategic resistance training for climbing will easily make up for any added muscle weight.
10 years ago, when I was maybe 8 kilos less, I just had like zero explosive power.
Yeah.
As soon as you had a lot, like big hold and there's no feet and you really have to just tack.
Yeah.
It was really bad. It's still not my strength, but I'm much stronger than what I used to be.
Yeah.
And I think if it's a complex route, I ended up climbing better.
Yeah.
With more kilos and more power.
Number 1, crimping is bad/dangerous. Oh boy, is this one gonna trigger some people. Anytime we even mention crimping, we get a slew of comments telling us that crimping is dangerous, you should never crimp, and that we're setting people up for immediate pulley injuries. But I'm here at the wall climbing gym in San Diego to say that crimping is not just useful for climbers, it's a necessity for climbing at higher grades on small holds and can be performed without injury. Let me explain with 2 scenarios. First, imagine me sitting at the PT clinic with my favorite patient, suddenly deciding I want to go for a run. My first run in years, in fact, but instead of going for a short run in my neighborhood, I figure I'm very good at walking, so running should be fine. I'm going to enter a marathon. I start the race at full speed with a major overstride, poor cadence, and knee valgus that would make any PT cringe. But I continue to push myself as hard as I can for a couple of hours, ignoring the pain building in the front and side of my knees until I ultimately end up puking in a ditch and calling for a stretcher because I can't take a single step without crippling pain. Now imagine a different scenario. In this one, I've run multiple marathons in the past, so I know I'm in good enough shape and have the technique dialed in. But I get a little too stoked and start running a marathon distance every other day. Midway through the second marathon, I start getting a nagging pain on the outside of my knee, but I ignore it and finish strong. That's what ice is for, right? No pain, no gain. By the fourth, the pain is really becoming a problem. I keep pushing, but I end up having to stop at mile 3 because my knee is seized up and I can't even walk. In either of these scenarios, I could of course conclude that running is dangerous and you should never do it. But that's not very accurate, so let's take a more nuanced approach. The problem here is not with running itself, but with how I approached it. The exact same thing is true with crimping. Crimping does indeed place higher stress on some connective tissue in your fingers compared to open-handed grips, just like running places higher demand on your body than walking, so you need to prepare for it. Your body can and will readily adapt to the demands of crimping if you give it enough load, rest, and nutrition to do so. And yes, this includes full crimping. Research has shown the A2 pulleys in climbers to be up to 50% thicker than non-climbers, and the middle phalanx bone around 100 to 150% thicker. Superhuman fingers. In practice, if you attempt to crimp everything all the time while ignoring the most fundamental aspects of technique, biology, and training, then yes, you'll probably get injured just like in the marathon. If the only stopping point you know is pain or major fatigue, you're setting yourself up for trouble. But in those cases, it's your approach that's dangerous, and taking that approach with just about anything is dangerous. Maybe we should just stop climbing altogether. I mean, my local crag is like 2 hours away, and I heard driving is dangerous. A special thanks to the YouTube members, some of you that have been members for over a year now. Becoming a member is a great way to support the channel, as well as buying a shirt or gear from the affiliate links in the description. Until next time, train, climb, send, investigate myths with a skeptical eye, and repeat.